I'm going over a 4-year-old interview here between Peter Whittle, who was at that time on the London Assembly. Since then, he started the New Culture Forum. I would recommend that channel. Peter Whittle is questioning the Assistant Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police at the time, Mark Simmons, on the recording of non-crime hate incidents across the UK. Now, Peter Whittle was giving Mr. Simmons a hard time over it, but have things changed? No, they haven't. And that's why we have to think about this very carefully before the upcoming elections, because the various parties have different attitudes towards the idea of non-crime hate incidents, haven't they? I'm Granniopteryx. I'm on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds. All right, I'm going to play you some of it, and I'm going to talk about the sort of answers that this robot gives to Mr. Whittle.
The Commissioner, you support the College of Policing guidelines on this then, that basically these incidents, even though they're not crimes, should be recorded as hate incidents. You support that?
We follow the College of Policing guidelines.
Right.
Just to explain, in case you don't know, what's happening is the police have taken it upon themselves to record what they call non-crime hate incidents. That is, if a neighbour complains about another neighbour shouting something over a fence, that let's start again. If person A complains to the police that person B has made a comment that isn't quite a crime, but has made person A feel uncomfortable, then the police will log this as what's called a non-crime hate incident. So it's not a crime, but you're already logged into the police, and you may not even know that. And the thing is that if anyone is doing a check into your background, that will pop up, and it's still happening. And Peter Whittle is talking about this in this interview here 4 years ago. So nothing has changed. And the Conservatives, who could have changed this, haven't changed it. The Labour Party, who will never change it, look like they're going to be getting into power. I have some hopes about that, but I don't want my hopes dashed. I don't want to get my hopes up. The only party that might do something about it is Reform. But they'll, if they're in any sort of a position to do it. Right, let's carry on.
That those hate incidents basically then can be seen by advanced checks, even though they're not crimes. They can be seen by advanced checks for people maybe going for certain types of jobs. They will come up. Even though there's no crime involved, that's fine by you.
They'll occur if a particular type of security check is taken. Yes, they'll be available to be disclosed.
And he can say that. Did you see the way he said it? Actually, he didn't just say yes. He went a bit around and around so to lessen the blow. But he's quite satisfied with that somebody is convicted on a nod.
Do you know very much about the case of Harry Miller that I think you referred to at the beginning there in the
Now, the case of Harry Miller is a case of a man. Now, this was a very fortunate coincidence. Harry Miller was a businessman, but before that he'd been a policeman. And he happened to pass some amusing limerick or something about a transgender person on Facebook, and some person, I don't know who, but I'm assuming it would have been some transgender person looking to be offended, reported it to the police. And then the police came round to Harry Miller's place of business. Now, it wasn't obvious that Miller owned the business. So as far as the police were concerned, they were going round to a place where a man was employed, asking loudly to talk to him about the possibility that he committed a hate crime. It turned out that Miller was the owner of the business, but the police didn't know that. And when that shocked Harry Miller spoke to the policeman about this, he said, you've become, well, basically he said, do you know what you've become? And this policeman was completely unimpressed by that. And actually Miller took this whole business to court, where a ruling was made against, I think it was the Hull police, but that ruling stands. It still hasn't stopped the police from turning up on people's doorsteps. They still prefer to go and bully people who've made social media posts. I think it was Konstantin Kisin who said that in Russia, about, I'm making up figures now, but it's something like this, about 10 people had been arrested for hate speech, or the Russian equivalent of it, in the previous year, and about 400 people in Britain had been prosecuted for hate speech, including, I might tell you, a young woman who posted the lyrics of the favourite rap song of a young neighbour friend of hers who was killed in a car accident. And she posted that in memory of him, and she was arrested. I think she had to wear an ankle thingy. That a 19-year-old girl. That was the Manchester police. Okay.
You know about the case?
I know about the case. I'm not an expert in it.
Right, okay. Well, you know that because of various tweets he liked, as it were, he was called by a policeman who said that he had come to check his thinking. Check his thinking. What is your view on that?
That's a matter, I mean, the circumstances of that particular case are a matter for Humberside Police, of course. I can't comment on whether the officer did the right thing or not. I wasn't part of that decision-making process.
Just a minute. He's saying he can't comment on whether the officer was right or not. That's a bit like this policeman telling somebody at one of these Saturday demonstrations for Gaza. There was something like, I don't know, a swastika. Oh, no. It was calling for jihad. Was it calling for jihad? And the policeman and this guy said, aren't you going to do something about it? And the policeman said, that's a matter for interpretation. So you see, and that was just a month or two ago. And we've got this policeman 4 years ago saying the same thing. Oh, this is just, I can't comment on this. It's just a matter for interpretation. What do they do to these guys? Do they just take them, like those kids in The Wall? You remember where the kids are going into the meat grinder. Well, do they just sit the police on this sort of conveyor belt, and then this thing comes down on their heads and fries their brain, and then they come out of the other side with fried brains?
All right, but I mean, you're a very senior policeman.
Yes,
right?
and
this just happens to be a case where Harry Miller had the perseverance, whatever, to go to the High Court. Yeah. We have no idea how this is, how many times this might be happening. He was told that he was had to check his thing.
Well, according to Konstantin Kisin, hundreds of times every year. But there are people who aren't as well placed to fight it as Harry Miller.
And basically, he came back and said this is sort of Orwellian. And basically, when it actually came down to the case, which was about him, I think he liked some sort of limerick about a trans woman, something like this. Essentially, the policeman then went into all sorts of strange details about why he'd come, and then said, I've been on a course about it. So your policemen are going on courses about this sort of thing, right? The end result...
Oh, that's it, going on courses. The meat grinder.
This man was taken to a very, very, a level of depression because of what was happening, because someone felt that they could check his thinking. Now, do you not find that that is an extremely frightening prospect that we're facing now?
It's a matter for Humberside. I can't comment on the Humberside Police case. All I can talk about is what the Metropolitan Police's approach to this is, because that's relevant to Londoners. And, the Metropolitan Police approach is in line with the College of Policing guidance, which is that we recognise that it's important to understand incidents which may amount to some form of...
Yes, I know you've already been through that. You've already told me. But the judge, Mr. Justice Knowles, in this particular case, right, compared the actions of the police to the Gestapo or to the Stasi, right? He said very, very worrying, very, very worrying. And there is this sort of...
So the judge actually said it's worrying, but has anything been done about it? This is what I'm talking about now. We all know about this. Has anything been done? No. And so, of course, the next question is, why not? Are we supposed to be kept in a state of fear about what we're saying all the time? Well, it looks that way, doesn't it?
Assumption made somehow that if someone says something which, that is a hate instance, this will automatically possibly lead to a hate crime. And he said that this was, in this particular case, that there was absolutely no evidence to suggest that at all, right? But it's still been reported. He's still on the statistics.
All I can say, I do understand the point you make, of course I do, and disproportionality is unwelcome wherever it occurs, and maybe this was disproportionate. I'm not giving a view on that. What I'm trying to say, I'm trying to reassure people...
Disproportionate?
No, I'm saying...
He's trying to reassure people. I don't find this very reassuring, because he's not talking straight, is he? He's talking round it all the time.
You are suggesting it's disproportionate. I'm saying that...
No, I'm suggesting it's more than that, actually, sir.
Right. I'm trying to sort of get to what you want to hear from me, which is it important for the Metropolitan Police...
I'm trying to get to what you want to hear from me. This is a man who has given his brain to someone else. Now, he's prepared to accept the idea of non-crime hate incidents. And now he's trying to square that by trying to please Peter Whittle by saying what Peter Whittle wants him to say. And he can't do it, of course. But do you see the mental attitude he has now? He has none of his own. He's got the common purpose guidelines, or whatever they're called. And then he's got the human response to Peter Whittle. And he's just trying to do both, unsuccessfully.
To recognise these kind of issues as potentially important. Yes, it is. Should we know that when we go to a neighbour dispute, for example, or any other kind of dispute, should we know that previously, when officers have been there, one or other of the parties has used offensive language for whatever...
Now, that's something else that is directly against British law. In British law, you're not allowed to bring up previous crimes. You are supposed to be tried on just the crime that you're committing at the time. So let's go back to person A and person B again. Let's say person B is one of those people who always wants to take offence. So person A says something over the fence like, can you not hang your washing on my fence, please? And person B then takes that as a criticism of his way of life, reports it to the police. That, if some policeman is inclined to do so, that will be registered as a non-crime hate incident. And then the next time person B does something else that person A doesn't like, the police will go there with this thing in their heads, or person A is obviously a bad person, he's already done this before, or something similar.
Based on the personal characteristics of the other person, is that an important thing for the officer to know in understanding how best to deal with the incident in front of them? I would say yes. So I think the principle is correct.
And there he slips. I mean, now he's talking about offensive language. So he's talking about one neighbour swearing at the other, maybe calling him a racially charged name or something. But that's not the way it works. That's something offensive depending on the mood of the officer who's logging the original complaint. That could be anything. As I said, it could be something as mild as talking about laundry, depending on the way the officer taking the complaint is feeling about it at the time. So he's skipping the issue here.
To many officers, you'll know that they go back time and time again to these kind of things, and they escalate. And this is the whole purpose of making the records, so that we understand.
This was a case that was not going to escalate. The judge made that perfectly clear. You're making this assumption, and as a result, going down a very, very dangerous road. Very dangerous road indeed, I would say. And if I could just sort of ask you as well in that case, to go back to the guidelines, whether we're talking about hate crime or hate incidents, what is your view on the definition, for example, that the word the victim, in the victim's perception, that this is possibly a hate crime, right? First of all, so the word victim is used immediately. Why do you not use the word complainant? Wouldn't that be legally...
Yeah, there's no victim if there's no crime. But the police are already halfway there to calling it a crime. And so they refer to the complainant as a victim.
Are safer?
These are all issues which have been debated and thought about clearly, and there's different...
Right. So now he's saying these are issues that have been debated and thought about clearly. He didn't say, I've thought about this. He's talking about some appeal to authority here. And like that thing about the science is settled or whatever. Don't ask me to think for myself. It's been debated. By who? I don't know. It's just been debated. And I've thought about clearly. Well, I wouldn't say it has been thought about clearly. He's saying it is. But I don't see any clarity here.
Approaches one can take, but what I come back to is our job is provide a service which people can be confident in.
And yeah, are you confident in this? He's again talking phrases, it has been debated, it's been thought about clearly, this is a service you can be confident in. Cut and paste. I mean, is this man a Stepford policeman? I mean, it looks like it, doesn't it?
I think if we start to use technical language with members of the public, they may not fully...
Okay, the public may not fully understand the use technical language. Technical language, in this case being the word complainant. Do you not understand the word complain? So the public is stupid now. You have some special knowledge, Mr. Simmons. You have some special knowledge. You understand the difference between complainant and victim. But the rest of the public, they wouldn't understand that. So we've got to shepherd them about. We've got to tell them when they've been naughty. And we've got to mark their copybook here so that they can't get jobs in certain places because they've been naughty like 20 years ago.
Complainant exactly means, whereas victim is a commonly understood term, which
it's assuming already
it's a commonly understood term by victims. You're not a victim if you're not a victim. The
problem.
Well,
if you put victim in the definition, it's assuming already.
This is a national position that's been adopted, and it's not for the Metropolitan Police Service.
Yeah, okay. So this is a national position that's been adopted. That's it. That's it. I switched my brain off.
There's reason to divert from it. So the terminology.
There's no reason to divert from it. Well, there is, because it's wrong. It is wrong. It is misuse of language. And that's one of the things that actually brought me into making YouTube videos. I get so upset about misuse of language, which politicians and people like this Metropolitan Police Assistant Commissioner they're doing it all the time. They are mangling language, and it's so important that language is precise. But he doesn't see it that way. Stepford Police
flows through everything that we do these days. There's the Victims Code, the Victims Charter, the Home Secretary talks about victims' rights. You know, that voters...
For victims! For victims! Not for people who are not victims.
I'm afraid. And we use the term victim to describe a range of people. In technical terms, if you're approaching a court case, you're a complainant. Or if you're making... But actually, we choose to use the word victim because that is the common parlance. That is what people understand.
No, you're choosing to use the word victim because it makes you feel like you're doing something. Instead of going after crimes where people really are victims, you are manufacturing victims. And then you can go at perfectly ordinary people. They're there, they're on Facebook, they're on Instagram, they're on X, whatever. And they're really easy to get at. So they're much easier to get at than chasing down robberies. Meanwhile, the actual crime statistics are appalling now. Absolutely appalling.
Some people don't like that. I understand that. But we have to use...
You always say you understand that, but you're not doing anything about it.
That is most acceptable to most people. And victim happens to be that word.
It doesn't worry you, for example, if you go on with that definition, that basically it requires no evidence whatsoever, that this is a unique thing in that it actually requires no evidence. In fact, it requires not only no evidence, but it's the perception of the victim along...
I mean, that's like somebody... It's on the way, and you know, this sounds surrealistically bad, but this would have sounded surrealistically bad 10 years ago. It's like a person who's standing there in the room and you're saying he's a murder victim because somebody punched him. And okay, it didn't actually kill him, but it was on the way to it, because that's basically what's going on here.
Anybody else? What does that actually mean as a policeman? How would you define that, or anybody else?
Well, the purpose of the wording as it is to make sure that there's a degree of subjectivity, because it's the important thing to understand.
A degree of subjectivity, and that is the whole problem. In law, there should be no degree of subjectivity. Or, I don't know, I can't think of an instance right now. There may be one or two outlying incidents, but no. Either you have physically attacked somebody or you haven't. Either you have called out a threat or you haven't. And here this degree of subjectivity can go in two directions, can't it? Those Jewish people who were threatened during a pro-Gaza demo, the policeman chose not to take their degree of subjectivity seriously. No, because his degree of subjectivity was that, well, you can interpret that in a couple of different ways. So that's the policeman's subjectivity against the person who'd been threatened. And the only question should be did that pro-Hamas demonstrator make a threat? That's all. But now he's talking about subjectivity.
About harassment and victimisation, there's the physical act, but then there's the perception and the effect it has on the individual. These are very difficult things to get right in exact language, but we try. And this definition is designed to recognise the subjectivity, that if you feel that the motivation behind the commentary is based on your personal characteristics and offensive, then that's how you feel. That's your reality.
But therefore,
I suppose they. I'm thinking of the machine that fries their brain, but maybe it just goes. They just put it into their soy lattes as they're having these common purpose conferences.
then should immediately become a crime statistic or a hate incident statistic, even though you feel that?
Well, that's how it.
I could feel something you're saying to me now is somehow hateful. What, can I go and report it? Yes, I can.
Well, I'd like to think I'm not being offensive.
I'm just using that as an example, and you know full well what I mean, sir, here.
No,
listen, the fact is that it seems to me that you are now policing people's thoughts. If a police officer turns up and says, I've come to check, I would need to check your thinking, right? The mere fact that even if he was going above and beyond these guidelines, that he felt he could do that. And what worries me is how many people, right, who don't have the various perseverance maybe of Harry Miller, actually would just simply go along with it because they're none the wiser.
I'm not quite sure I'm not sure what you want me to say. I mean, I'm trying to set out the
There you are. I'm not sure what you want me to say. I just look at him. Even look at his body language. Shoulders down. He wants to say what... Has any of you read the Martian Chronicles? There were in the Martian Chronicles, there were these creatures on Mars who took on the persona of what the other people wanted. And there's this one rather tragic story where one family, they saw one of these creatures and he was picking up that they wanted their dead son back. So he started to look like their dead son. And then another family saw him and they wanted him to be their, I don't remember, their dead dad or something. And the two families were tussling over this creature who was becoming the son and the father. Well, that sounds religious. You know what I mean. He was becoming these two people, but they killed him in the end. He reminds me of that.
Position. The specifics of the Humberside case is difficult for me to comment on for obvious reasons. You know, it's not my force. I don't understand the very, very fine detail of what you do. I'm not saying you're wrong. It's not something that's familiar to me. What I can do is describe the approach the Met Police takes and explain the reasons why we take that approach. And that's pretty much the approach most police...
You haven't explained the reasons because you can't give any reasons. Nothing that makes any sense.
Take College of Policing guidance is evidence of that, and I think it's the right approach for the reasons I've articulated. Will there be occasions where...
For reasons... Now, that's a good one. For reasons I've articulated. This is a man who's telling people that they're not intelligent enough to understand the difference between complainant and victim. And then he uses the word articulated instead of said. Why did he? I wouldn't. I have a pretty good vocabulary. I would never use the word articulated. But you see, when you articulate something, you're saying it with your mouth. It doesn't mean to say you're feeling it in your brain. When you are articulating something, you are merely reproducing a sound that sounds like words, but it doesn't mean those words are in your head. And he gave the game away there, didn't he? Just go back a little bit.
And explain the reasons why we take that approach. And that's pretty much the approach most police forces take. College of Policing guidance is evidence of that. And I think it's the right approach for the reasons I've articulated. Will there be occasions where somebody gets it wrong? Undoubtedly, there are all the time, not just with this type of thing, but with all sorts of things. We're all human. But it doesn't mean that the principle is wrong, I think.
I think the principle is wrong.
I think the principle is wrong as well.
I think that it is. I'm alarmed to hear you say that you have no problem with the guidelines. I am very alarmed because this is making you into the thought police. You know, it's making you the thought police, not just the police. And when you think as well what we've been discussing here today about sexual offences, about violent crime going up, the mere fact that whether it's the Met Police or wherever it is over the country are doing this kind of thing, you know, will make most people extremely frustrated at the very, very least.
And I'm only going through that again because nothing has been done about it. And we like to think we're in a free democracy and free speech and all the rest of it. And we've got robots like that. Think about that when you're casting your votes in a few days now. Okay, till next time. You can help my channel by clicking like, by subscribing, by clicking the notification bell, and by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels are in the description, also links to donation sites, but really the best way you can help me is simply by clicking like. Thank you.